Every so often I'm a little bit mad that instead of getting the being able to count to pi to the millionth digit autism, I got the I think Maleficent was hot as a dragon autism, because I was absolutely an awful Boy Scout. And in fact, in like the 3 years I was in the scouting program, I only got like 3 merit badges. And I really only got that far because at one point my dad was so embarrassed by me that he got into the scouting program as a chaperone and just signed off on a bunch of stuff. So the other adults in our church group would stop asking him if I was developmentally challenged. That's actually kind of ironic though, because one of the few merit badges I had was the disability awareness badge that we all got because we did have a special ed guy in this group with us. Now, to be fair, they weren't too far off because I am pretty messed up. Here, let me explain. In the 30 some odd years that I've been alive, I've only ever learned to tie one knot, and that's a noose. And I don't really remember where I learned to tie it, but at 13, I thought the noose was the coolest thing in the planet. And as I still use it every day when I run cable runs and occasionally have to solder connections, I'm beginning to feel I'm a little bit more justified in this belief. Hey, here's a hypothetical for you. Someone is drowning and you gotta throw a rope down for them. If you tie the noose, its self-tightening properties will allow them to just latch on and get pulled up just fine. And in fact, it's not even considered a drowning death if he suffocated after he got out of the water. So you're totally clear. And honestly, this logic can apply to pretty much everything. Let's say you gotta walk your dog and you only have a rope. Just tie a noose. Let's say you got a kid and he keeps running away. Well, if you tie a noose around his waist, you now got a makeshift leash for him too. I'm sure people are gonna give you weird looks and they're gonna call protective services, but it's not because they actually think the kid's in danger. They're actually just amazed at how resourceful you are. And I mentioned the whole noose thing because we had this scoutmaster growing up that I nicknamed Porkins on account of the fact that he looked like a pregnant bowling pin and always carried around a bag of hot pork rinds with him wherever he went. Think Annie Wilkes from Misery, but significantly less attractive. In fact, this guy was so notorious in our scout troop, he had a reputation for just signing off any merit badge as long as you met 1 or 2 of the key points. To give you an example of this, he gave me my art merit badge when I drew a single picture that I had traced of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Trunks from Dragon Ball Z having a sword fight. And so he took this laziness with him wherever he went, including the climbing merit badge. So instead of doing what he was supposed to do, which was take us to a rock climbing gym and, sit there and make sure we know how to wear a helmet and stuff like that, he just locked us in a gym for 2 hours with a book and was like, hey guys, so here's a book of knots, and if you guys could all show me 5 knots at the end of this scouting activity, I'll sign you off. You're all good to go. You get the badge. And that's cool and all, and honestly, most of the people did just that. They got their merit badges, but not me. You see, I was so obsessed with the noose at the time that I just tied 5 nooses. And then I tied them around chair legs, and I tied it to a bunch of bundle of sticks that I found outside. And the whole idea was hey, I don't need to tie 5 knots. If I show this guy 5 good nooses, he'll sign off and everything will be good. Spoiler alert, I didn't get the badge. And if you think my noose escapades stopped there, they absolutely didn't. In fact, a few weeks later after that failed merit badge, we had one of those 50 troop camporees where everybody gets together to earn merit badges over a week. And I took that as an opportunity to show off how cool I was to a bunch of new strangers who didn't know me yet. Now, unfortunately, as you may have guessed, I was a pretty awkward teenager with no aura. And as this was 2003, I had hyper-focused on the time on Shadow the Hedgehog. So in my brain, I'm sitting here going, oh man, what would Grimbles the Edgehog do to make friends? You know what my solution was? I was going to tie a bunch of nooses around my wrists using the shoelaces I had, and then whenever I ran into somebody randomly in the woods, I would just start spinning around in front of them like an autistic food processor. I honestly think the only thing worse than me thinking this was a good idea is that it took 4 days before somebody finally put a stop to my impromptu murder knot rave sessions. And by put a stop to it, I mean, one of the Eagle Scouts from my troop finally jumped me, and in an act of something that I can only define as selfless bullying, he had the kid, who, by the way, I was certified to be aware of, sit on me while he tied my wrists using necklace knots. And then they ran off in the woods and abandoned me. Now here's the thing. Necklace knots are almost impossible to untie by yourself. So instead of being able to do anything, I was so embarrassed that I just wandered around the woods like a, escaped inmate for a bit until it was finally time to come to the camp dinner where we were doing a Dutch oven cook-off. At that point, one of the counselors finally was like, hey, Grimbles, it's really weird that you're sitting so politely and not trying to light someone's tent on fire. What's going on, man? And at that point, I had no choice but to show him that I'm sitting here with 2 nooses around my wrists tied together, and I just can't do anything. So the guy takes one look at this, and he goes, oh, I need to go get my knife. And then makes it like 3 steps before he just starts laughing at me. And the worst thing is, like, it wasn't even him. Everybody at the campsite was laughing at me at this point in time. And so I want you to imagine this. I'm like Carrie, covered in pig's blood, except I don't have like any pyrokinesis to make these guys pay. And instead, I just have to sit there while they laugh at me for a good, like, solid 5 minutes. And you wanna know what the worst thing is? I absolutely did not learn my lesson. In fact, a little while later, a 9/11 anniversary occurred, and Porkins went through one of his, "We gotta get you guys through as many merit badges as we can before the Taliban attack, or we gotta fight on American soil," and decided the best merit badge we could possibly get to fight the Taliban was the business merit badge. And once again, this guy does not care. So his decision here is, instead of, like, going through and figuring out, like, interviewing with businesses, he's like, all right, guys, here's a pirated copy of PowerPoint. Just come up with a business proposition, and in 2 weeks, we're going to have these PowerPoint presentations in the church gym, and you're going to present in front of your family and everybody. Now, here's the thing. Everybody actually, for whatever reason, took this super seriously. In fact, one guy came up with a business plan where people could rent and timeshare horses for when their daughters go through that really weird, like, I want to be a horse girl phase. And it actually did super well. And now you'd think I wouldn't take this very seriously because, hey, I don't care about merit badges. But I actually did. And I had a very clever business strategy. But the thing was, I was going to keep it top secret. Nobody was going to know until the day of the presentation. And unfortunately for the adults, they took the mystique and the mysteriousness of me not talking about it as a sign I was taking it super seriously, and they all got really excited. Like, my mom was excited that I was taking scouts properly. Porkins was like, I've never seen Grimbles so excited about anything in my life. And they didn't even ask me what the business plan was. So when it finally came time to present this business plan to everybody, Porkins pulls me aside and he's like, all right, Grimbles, you've shown some real effort here. I'm going to let you go last. You're going to be our anchor presenter. And then he just didn't even check what the presentation was about. So then it's time. It's like 7:30. It's the end of the scout thing. And all the parents, they're patting their kids on the back. I go up to present, and my business plan is a contracting firm that sells electric fences to water parks. My mother was mortified, and my father was laughing so hard that there were just legitimately tears in his eyes as he beat me with a wooden spoon that night. Side tangent time. Before I get into my final story, I'd really appreciate if you guys hit that like, subscribe button, hit the bell, all that good stuff. You know how it is. Reason I'm asking, I'm not trying to do this to make money, but I'm running out of Z-boards. I bought like 20 a while ago, and they're all starting to break on me. So I'm trying to get to 1 million subscribers so I can go to SteelSeries PR and just say, hey man, remake this please. So that's my goal. I know it's a long shot, but if you hit that subscribe button, I hit 1 million subscribers, I'm going to make you guys the best keyboard on the planet. All right, back to the stories. Towards the end of my scouting days, Porkins was pretty much done with me. Like, it had been 3 years and I'd earned 3 merit badges. But to the guy's credit, he was pretty determined to see me succeed at something. So in a last-ditch effort, he goes, all right, guys, easiest merit badge in the book. We're going to do the fingerprinting merit badge. All we got to do, go to the police station, get our fingerprints done, and you get the merit badge. And no, like, actually, if you look in the book, that's literally the merit badge. Now, that would have been easy, that would have been great, and everything would have gone fine, except I had literally just watched Fight Club the week before, and I was convinced that at one point I was going to blow up MasterCard, and I did not want my fingerprints on anything. So the very next week, as we're getting ready to do this merit badge, I'm in shop class that day, and I'm trying to figure out how to get rid of my fingerprints. So I turn on the belt sander, and I start doing that thing where I'm like, all right, I gotta put my finger on the belt sander. I just cowered out. You ever see a belt sander moving at 100 miles an hour? You do not want to stick anything on that. I then tried to sit there with an X-Acto knife and stab myself in the hand. That didn't work. So in a last-ditch effort, I went up to the girl who always had like Yaoi on her binder and wore a Gur hoodie. And I was like, hey, Rebecca, can you do me a favor and just start giving me paper cuts on my fingertips, please? And by the way, that's a terrible idea because you need those fingertips for everything. And so the consequences of this is I literally couldn't type on a keyboard for a week. But, to Rebecca's credit, she did it. And she was very good at it. And I totally sliced up my left hand. Unfortunately, that's not good enough. And when we showed up at the police precinct, even though my hands were totally sliced up, they were still able to fingerprint me, no problem. So Porkins is over here, thinks I'm a total spaz. My hands are cut up, and I still got fingerprinted. So when I finally, take my revenge on MasterCard, there's going to be evidence everywhere. All right, guys, that's the end of the stories. Really appreciate you sticking around, and I'll catch y'all later. So really weird thing, originally this was going to be 2 stories of mine, and I was going to read some 4chan green text and some other stuff, but the internet seems weirdly embarrassed by Boy Scouts to the point where it's got like a really bad reputation. I understand there was like a bunch of, anti-gay stuff going on, like, the don't say gay and stuff like that. But just the raw hostility for Boy Scouts. Like, I had a legitimate reason to hate Boy Scouts, okay? The mentally disabled kid tried to push me down a porta potty at one point. If anybody's allowed to argue about how bad Boy Scouts is, it's me. You guys are just like, yeah, I don't like Boy Scouts because they didn't tell me what Devil's Club was, then they hate gay people. Like, that's weak, man. Come on. Really? All right, I'll catch you guys later.